Everybody. So yeah, a warm welcome from me, Sam Baker, speaking on behalf of everybody who's been involved in Walk2COP27 and in fact, indeed, been involved in general in the fight against climate change. So thank you for coming. We have got it on record, so people will be able to look at this afterwards. And we are relatively fluid in terms of our panelists at the moment. The three of them are at COP. So Shamim's at COP and she might have to duck out and come back in again. Yasmin's in an airport. So it's going to be fun. What I'd like to do then is to cover the following things in the next 85 minutes. So have some introductions, or at least from Shamim, from Nadia, and from Yasmin. So have some introductions. Very important that you understand the voice of where the people come from who are providing some voice over the important topics we're going to tackle. The second is then to talk about Walk2COP27. So this is an initiative that's been running this year. It's all about mass participation, using COP as a point in the calendar to try and rally around climate change. And we'd just like to talk about that and talk about our experience of running that. And that's particularly me and Yasmin, who will introduce herself in a minute. We then want to move on to COP27 itself and really ask the people who are there, the people who are involved in the sessions, to help us pick through how it's going. And in terms of how it's going, fascinating to understand what the expectations were going into it, how it's playing out at the moment. Obviously, it hasn't finished, and we hope for great things. But how it's playing out at the moment, but also what people are going to take away. So will this impact and affect what you actually do on a day-to-day basis? So we're going to cover that in the second half. But before we continue, we would just like then to have introductions from the people who are here. And what I would say before people introduce themselves is that we have a group of people, I think, here who are communicators. They are serious of intent. They are doers. They're organizers. In a word, they're activists. And every one of them courageous. And I thank all of you for doing what you do. But let us hear it in your own voice. So Yasmin, please, first.
Hello, everyone, and best regards from Istanbul, Türkiye. I'm an architect as profession, and for very many years I have been working in the energy efficiency and renewable energy sectors. Since the pandemic, I have been working in a few non-governmental organizations, and today I'm representing Women in Renewable Energy Turkey chapter. I'm the leader of the Turkey chapter. And it has been a great journey, and I would like to set my best regards to Sam and everyone out here.
Thank you. Cathy, hi. We're just doing introductions, so perfect timing. Over to you.
Great. I hope I'm audible.
Very much so.
Okay. Does this work like this, or?
That's good.
Okay, great. Lovely. Great to see everyone. I'm Cathy, who by profession works in consulting, but also been in the UN climate change processes, focusing on policy since I was a teenager, and also advised 6 UN agencies as youth advisor. So great to see everyone. And I've been hearing a lot about Walk2COP27 and also last year's Walk2COP26 from Sam and other friends. So really great to see everyone.
Excellent. Nadia, can we hear from you? Nadia, you're on mute. This is a good trial. Nadia, can you hear us? If not, so Shamim, can you come back in?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Hi, everybody. My name is Shamim Zawadi from Tanzania. I'm an environmental activist and a social scientist, and I'm just looking forward for this fruitful session and to learn and enjoy the session. And yeah, just looking forward to hear from everybody your perspective about COP and blah, blah, because myself as well, I'm in Sharm. I'm here for COP27 as well. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you, Shamim. Nadia, have we? No, I don't think we're going to get. Nadia's going to try and dial in. So hopefully someone join, and hopefully Nadia. But it's I'm not sure the conditions are optimal. So we've got Shamim, for instance, is perched outside her. Cathy, you seem to have got a nice building, but Shamim is perched outside the hall that she was in. So anyway, we will play it by ear. So what I'd like to do then is just to start off by talking about COP27, as I said, and then hand over to Yasmin. So the objective of this initiative was really to try and drive this sort of mass participation with an eye to climate action. And when we thought about climate action, we thought about that in terms of 4 outcomes. So the first is obviously decarbonization, also known as mitigation. The second was resilience. Also around, also sort of the verb to that is adaptation. The third was justice, and the fourth was circularity. And we thought all of those were crucially important. And we wanted to do this by creating an opportunity to learn, to forge solidarity between the people who got engaged, and also to make important connections. And the point about COP is obviously this is something which I think in the past arguably has been quite scientific and policy led, and we hope that's beginning to open up to more of a sort of citizen interested topic in the calendar that we can rally around and we can express our views and push for progress. So that's what we're trying to do. The idea was that we would gradually build up over the year, and then starting on the 22nd of September, this big noisy group of people who come from business, who come from environmental NGOs, who come from government, who come from universities and schools, and everybody doing what they do, but then also using this initiative to then try and amplify what they're doing and engage with each other within their groups, but also between groups. So that was the idea. And the activities that we did, that we used to try and deliver this, the first one is an opportunity to walk. So unlike COP26, when we walk from London to Glasgow and we put one foot in front of another, this one is walking, but it's walking where you are. So people have been walking wherever they are, tracking that distance, putting it on an app from the 22nd of September. We've so far got close to 1,700 people walking, close to 100,000 kilometers. And the number of trees planted, as you see, this is going to Burundi through the Jane Goodall Institute. So that was one thing. And the idea there, yes, in part it was about the trees, but it was also about getting people to do something together. So the second thing was a series of town hall sessions. So in order to keep this idea of a walk, we started in Scotland, we had our town hall there, we had a town hall in England, and then we went down the countries, down towards Egypt. And each of those town halls were unique in their own way, but they were expositions of local climate challenges and what's being done about them. They were delivered by people in country, people from government, people from businesses, students, activists, all sorts of different people, and tremendously rich discussions. And so that allowed us to imagine we've got this journey from north to south, but also to listen to the important messages that everybody had for us. The third was a series of participant-led clubhouse sessions. So these were audio only, 1 hour long sessions, led by anybody who's enthusiastic and wanted to do so. And some amazing breadth there of content. So Amna Habiba started off from Pakistan, talking about the floods there and talking about, female empowerment within the climate process. We had David Coe talking about transformational ownership of oil and gas assets. We had an organization called Business Declares in the UK talking about activism in business. So a huge range of topics, all recorded, all available to hear and see. And then the final thing was just using social media to try and amplify the fantastic things that other people are doing and the things that we're doing, so we then could amplify their things better. So that's what we did. And obviously we're coming to an end. This is the last town hall. And then at the end of the week, we finish our walk, our virtual walk. We put the tally up and then we decide how many trees we've actually managed to plant. And what I'd like to do is I'd just like to play back some of the reflections, because for me, the most interesting thing, there's two things. One is the connections I've made, which I've massively appreciated. They're hugely seminal in how I'm going to go forward. But the second thing is then the sort of the content that's come through, which has allowed me to sort of crystallize my own narrative around climate change and what we need to do about it. And so I offer that up, not as my voice, but really the voice of the people who we've heard in the town halls, in social media, in the clubhouse sessions. So to that, I think the first point is that generally now everybody's saying, there is a common understanding, thanks to the media, thanks also sadly, obviously, to the massive issues and challenges we face and experience, but we broadly understand that climate change is happening wherever we are, in all the different countries that we've touched upon. And people are feeling this directly and indirectly. And of course, Amna Habiba, I mentioned Pakistan. Some people feel this very viscerally, and it's incredibly disruptive to their life, possibly even existential threat to their lives. And then there are other ways which let us understand how people experience this. And I'll just point to one, which this is UNICEF's report, which said 40% of young people are reconsidering having children as a result of climate change or their expectations of what's going to happen. And that goes to 50% on the African continent. So for me, that's a massive decision. Not everybody wants to have children or can have children, but to have that seminal decision, to have to reconsider it because of the challenge of climate change, I think really brings home the predicament that we're in at the moment. The third bit of this is really that the good news, which is broadly we know what to do about it. We know how to mitigate. We know that it's fossil fuels. We know we need renewables. We know in terms of adaptation, but maybe a little bit more complex and a bit more multifaceted. But broadly, we know what we need to do around adaptation. We know we need to look after our natural assets. In terms of justice, again, we're experienced at talking about justice. To actually then deliver it, of course, is a different matter, but we know what to do about it. And circularity probably needs a bit more work. But broadly, everybody's saying, we've got the tools and the techniques and the technologies, we need to put it into practice. And maybe that changes 10, 15 years out, but for sure, it's okay now. The second thing is that, why isn't it happening though? And it seems like now we've got this huge challenge, this huge issue, which potentially disrupts the system and all parts of it. And as a result of that, we find it incredibly difficult to reconcile that with what we actually do on a day-to-day basis, how we live our lives, our roles, our jobs, the ambitions we harbor, the values that we hold. So all of these things are potentially irreconcilable or appear to be irreconcilable with this huge implication and challenge that we see. And as a result of that, there's cognitive dissonance between the challenge we face and then how we live our lives. And that's resulting in people deluding themselves, fake narratives, willful ignorance, people just not really getting with it and trying to work and understand what's happening and how quickly it's happening. Fear and loathing. We've had a series of protests in the UK and they have disrupted, traffic and people's daily lives, but it's nothing compared to the strikes we see or maintenance on the roads. And yet the fear and loathing expressed in the media is striking, and it points to the fact that people are actually beginning to realize there's a huge issue at hand which is going to disrupt their daily lives. And the worst probably stasis on the end, which just says people aren't doing stuff. They just can't really reconcile, and therefore they're not doing things. So yes, we understand it, but no, we're not doing enough. And there's this big gap between the great things that the activists are doing on one side and how we live our lives on the other. The third thing that's come through, and probably I remember the French town hall better than any, which said that, whether it was local authorities, it was people from business, it was students, it was the academic sector, but it was the point that everybody in that town hall said that we need better education. And this is not to understand that something is afoot. We understand something's afoot, but this is really to understand the order of magnitude, what happens, how it happens, why it happens, how quickly, how is it going to impact us very, very individually, but also as a locality, a communication, a nation, and as a series of nations, indeed an entire global society. What can we do about it? And what are we doing about it? And what are we not doing about it, and why? So for instance, quite often we hear the refrain, well, if it's that big, somebody must be doing something about it. And we need to know if that's true. Otherwise, we can't progress. And so there is this ongoing need for education. And after all, the context is dynamic. The science is sort of, we're developing new understandings. We're seeing, impacts far earlier and harder than we expected. Things like the COP process, we need at least at a high level to understand roughly whether or not that's going to be our savior or it's got to be something else. We need to understand this if we're going to conquer climate change. So the fourth is that now we're in a situation where, yes, local action, individual action, of course it's important, and it's very important for people's health, mental health, and the ability to feel you're making a difference in a change. But the order of magnitude of the change, the speed, the scale of the transformation really needs policy. It needs policy, it needs governments, and that means we as individuals, one of the most important things we can do is to make those people know that we care. Yeah, we care and we want change. And as a result of that, that has to cascade out, and the people who want to stay in power will understand that. And I think that obviously people live in different political systems, but I think that's what's coming back across all the different countries. That advocacy is crucially important. The fifth is, where does this sit vis-a-vis other priorities? And again, the strong message coming through is this needs to be a foundational priority. It needs to be something which underpins everything else. It needs to be something which shapes the political sector and how we act, but it is non-partisan. So it sits, underneath parties or party political, issues and challenges. And we haven't seen that. We've all seen, whether it's the UK, the US, and many other places, we've seen this used as a political part of the conversation. And it needs to be non-partisan. So it means apolitical, but taken up by all political parties. And in business and in other types of organization, we need it to be pre-competitive. We don't want it to be, we don't have time to compete our way out of this. We need it to be pre-competitive, shared, accelerated, catalyzed, so we can make the change we need to make. The next point is leadership. And this is a point for all of us. So for me, for you, for everybody else, is that we need leadership. And the sort of leadership we really need is to move from all this incredible amount of information and science and concern and technologies to action, because that's the bit that we're missing. And so whether that's locally or in the family or at the organizational level or nationally or internationally, we need leadership to be able to use what we've got, this huge amount of information we've already got, and rather than ask for more information and more data and more, planning and more targets, is begin to act. And then the final thing, which I think for me is come through from being engaged in this initiative over the last year, which is the really good news, is there are so many people, and I suspect many, if not everybody on the call, this includes, it certainly includes our panelists. So many people are pushing for change. So better connections between those people, more collaboration between those people, a greater sense of solidarity could really turn this into something which is more unified, more cohesive, and becomes a match for this enormous challenge we face. So I'll stop there, but that's really a summary of what we've been told, and I feel privileged to have been the receptacle of that. There are many other components, obviously. What I'd like to do now is to hand over to Yasemin, and Yasemin drove our efforts in Türkiye, and this was arguably one of the most involved countries that we had. And so Yasemin, over to you for some reflections from your side.
Thank you so much. It has been a very, very interesting journey for all of us in Türkiye. So when first Sam approached us and we were discussing how we should proceed and how we should come out with this, we gave a good thought on it. I mean, Turkey is facing, of course, very many problems due to climate change. We have had severe forest fires, we have landslides, and we have rainfalls, and also taking into consideration that we have the mass immigration issue in Turkey. We are, of course, realizing that in the coming years, we will have very many immigrants coming to perhaps our country, or we will be immigrants due to climate change, climate crisis. So we have to act now, and we have to act robustly. So all levels in the society, people are trying to find answers to their questions, starting from the elementary schools, going up to the decision makers. And so this was our starting point. And we were lucky because many years I have been working in the field which is quite related to climate change. And when we were planning which town hall event we should do and which municipality we should select for it, our parameters were quite different than the common. Instead of picking up the capital of the country or going to a world famous city, we decided to select a more modest municipality which is geographically quite small, but contentfully quite big. So we selected Nilüfer municipality. Nilüfer municipality is actually a district municipality, but it houses 8 industrial zones. So this means that they have a huge impact on the carbon emissions, and they are getting lots of requests for more construction. So also looking into what they have been doing in the past years and what they were looking this year, we happily came across that they had selected this year as the climate year. So they had very many events going on. So what we did was actually to reschedule their calendar, and we placed all the events, different events taking part within the Walk2COP27 calendar. And this was, of course, very good. People, they had heard about COP26, and they were hearing about COP27, but they did not know that COP was related to climate change. So this brought, of course, a huge awareness in the society, and really they were really eager to bring up their case internationally, and it was quite successful. They really made huge public events, huge walking and running events also. And today I was talking with them, just getting some ideas of what they were thinking and if there was anything I want to tell on behalf of them. And they said, what are we doing in 2023? What are we doing for COP28? Talk to Sam and the others and how we can better escalate this. So the biggest problem was the technological, of course, problems, like how to download the Atlas Go or the Clubhouse. And because it was in English and not in Turkish, very many people could not join. So we should not only look at the numbers who joined the Atlas Go, who joined to Clubhouse, because I have very many friends in social media. Every day they are writing to Facebook, today I walked this many steps, this many kilometers, but it's out of Atlas Go. So I believe that really it has made a big change in the life of the people. And also looking at what the different schools, elementary schools have been doing, secondary schools have been doing, they have seen us at the TV, they have heard about what we are doing, they have listened to what we were doing in other town halls also. So within their own school, they took their own initiative and the students have been walking. They placed this Walk to COP27 in their curriculum. So as I said, it has been huge. It has had a huge impact, and we cannot come up with numbers to understand what has really been going on. And personally, I'm delighted, of course, because as I said, for many years I have been working on this issue, but realizing that theory, scientific knowledge is being now transferred to the society, and that people, any people, commoners, butchers, grocers, people who are not dealing with the science we are dealing, that they are changing their daily habits is the most important.
Brilliant. Okay, well, Yasemin, thank you so much for that. And I would say that, you know, it was really well organized in Türkiye, and that was definitely part of the reason for what I would consider a success and the large number of people engaged. But it does say a lot for the population as well, that they were receptive, they were interested, they wanted to learn, and they then engaged and did stuff with us as well. So well done, Türkiye. Thank you very much indeed for that. So let us, anybody can ask a question. So I don't see any at the moment, but there is Q&A. So I don't know if Nadia, Cathy and Shamim, before we move on, I don't know if you've got any questions for, particularly for Yasemin or for me around COP27 and what we did.
Actually, I'm having
I think Nadia was saying, actually, I'm having difficulty. Yeah. Nadia, we couldn't hear you, unfortunately. We sort of half heard you. But let us then move on to the next bit of the agenda. So next bit of the agenda then is really around COP27. We have, in a very layperson's approach, we've tried to summarize the agenda items for COP27 in our different town halls. We've engaged a little bit of discussion about it. You know, we've all, I think, been particularly concerned around mitigation, and we've seen the small number of countries, less than 30, who, as I think I understand, who have revised their nationally defined contributions, so the plans for reducing emissions. So that's obviously of concern. We've seen that in the run-up to COP. And we've also seen, you know, the conversations around adaptation and a new global adaptation goal. So I don't know if our panelists are going to tell us that's very important or it's not. And then, of course, masses of conversation about finance in the run-up to COP and about loss and damage. And again, in my layman's perspective, I'm thinking there's a financing, obviously, for changing people's energy infrastructure. So that's typically a global north or a global south transfer, and that was part of the 100 billion that was promised. So that's one bit. There is finance for adaptation, which is a small part of the 100 billion, which is supposed to increase. And I think that's largely separate. And then thirdly, of course, there's this concept of loss and damage for damage or challenge, which has already been incurred, and how that gets resolved. And the numbers are obviously staggering. So I think that the Pakistan announced that it was going to be more than 30 billion, I think, to repair the infrastructure damaged by the floods. So, you know, one series of weather events in one country taking, 30 billion. So the numbers are eye-wateringly big, potentially. Again, really, really hoping to hear that our panelists feel that there's some progress against some of those things. But also interested, obviously, Cathy, Shamim, and Nadia, if you can hear us, is what you've been doing, because of course there's a million things that you can get involved in, and it's not necessarily those things, it might be other things. And obviously you've all got youth agendas and you've got justice agendas, so really interested to hear that. So with that, Cathy, perhaps we can start with you and just talk about expectations to begin with. So what expectations did you have before you got on the plane and flew over?
Well, my expectation was this is going to be a holiday resort, and the reality was quite the opposite, let's be honest. I certainly wouldn't choose this as a holiday resort place. But no, I think in terms of actual negotiations, I had really high hope for the Gender Action Plan review, which has been adopted a few years back in 2019, and this year is the midterm review, and I think everyone was really disappointed. And I think for some of our participants, if you follow the news, you might have seen that all the media, all the NGOs are calling this a huge failure, which basically we made very little progress in the last week. But then on the other hand, there are also negotiations that went really well. For example, Action for Climate Empowerment, which is the negotiation track that really the young people or civil society stakeholders use this as an opportunity to advocate for their rights and their involvement, their engagement, and their leadership, which went very well. And my favorite negotiation technology was kind of in the middle, which wouldn't call it a failure in any way, but also it did take some late nights negotiations, including ones till 2 a.m. But in general, I say negotiations a mix. And so some wrapped up last week, like the three that I mentioned. Some, like loss and damage, like adaptation, are still going on this week. And so we'll see what happens. But I'm happy to see that there's some initiatives being launched, like the Global Shield co-launched by my organization, Global Sahara Adaptation, and B20 together with G7, which in some way it's some good news about loss and damage finance, which is definitely on the very top of my head this year. But then at the same time, that the thing that really matters the most on loss and damage finance is to get a COP decision on loss and damage finance facility, which currently is still struggling. But without diving into too much technical details on state actor engagement, I think there's too many corporate logos you can see everywhere. So I guess on one hand, you can say that it's great that there's still attention and interest from corporates, but at the same time, I think this year is really about delivering the promises made from last year. And I think there are obviously barriers for civil society participation, of youth participation, whether it's hotel, whether it's the price here, or whether it's the mapping system here is not really working. But yes, I'd say it's a really mixed feeling COP, and many people are quite frustrated. But at the same time, you know, like I think initiatives like Walk to COP27 and all these cool things that are happening outside and actions on the ground really is what keeps people motivated and passionate within the space.
And maybe, and Cathy, just going back to the sort of the expectations a little bit, because I think we'll come back to any progress that you've seen, but back to the expectations. I mean, if you think about the circles you mix in, you know, because you're, you know, roving around the UN, you're speaking to lots of youth groups, you're, you know, in the private sector as well. Just do that. Where were expectations? Were they, you know, were we realistic to think that we could make significant progress? Were people damping down their expectations?
I think within negotiations, the expectation was kind of, you know, reflects or linked to the reality, because it's not a COP is not like a once a year thing that, you know, it happens once a year, you expect something and oh, you get it or not. It's a, you know, there's so much intersectional work that goes on throughout the year. So I think people know what we're working towards, and people try, and you know, I think there's always the expectation is build on those intersectional work, which is why that I think for negotiations is not very that much of a surprise. But I think at the same time, for loss and damage finance is always you know, shifting, and you know, you never know until the last second. But then I think outside of negotiations, I think many civil society stakeholders did, from my view, I think they weren't expecting so many challenges and barriers of their participation this time. So I'd say that's truly a surprise, and myself was also very surprised. And yes, there are many flies. But yeah, but still, I think, you know, it's great to see that. I don't think I've ever seen so many young people in the space, that now for the first time there's a youth pavilion, and there's also an ocean pavilion that I was there for the first time. That's also never existed before. So I think, you know, there are really cool and new things happening, and with the support of the high level champions, with the support of many other partners, and also, I guess, get me some positive vibes.
Cool. Cathy, did we just lose you, or?
Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's all I want to say.
Okay, very good. So, Shamim, can we bring you in? Can you hear us? Shamim. Yeah, this isn't going according to plan, but hey. Okay, Shamim, we can't hear you at the moment. You're on mute. You had a beautiful signal earlier.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. That's good.
Yeah. I'm just coming out of the meeting that I had earlier. It just took like 5 minutes, and I'm trying to find a quiet place to sit and then talk. I don't know if you can give me like 2 minutes.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We'll crack on. So dial back in and, come off mute in a couple of minutes, and then we'll come back to you. Okay, so let's move on to representation then, Cathy, because you touched on that. So one of the things, you know, in the news, obviously, is who's represented. So it's great to hear that there's good youth representation. That's fantastic. Shamim, I was having a chat with Shamim earlier. She felt there was a lack of representation from Indigenous people, or also and that population. So we'll probably hear from Shamim on that. And perhaps some of the more controversial points made in the news here is obviously the number of those affiliated to the oil and gas industry. And again, my understanding, I think at COP26, it was, however it was messaged, they were basically not really invited, although I'm sure that, you know, many lobbyists were there. And I think that's been reversed here, and they're talking about that being the second largest, second largest, if you add them all up, I think over and above any other delegation, it's the second largest. So I suppose my question to you is you know, generally, I think that's portrayed as a bad thing, and people saying, you know, and we've got You know, Greta saying, you know, you don't invite mosquitoes to a convention about how to tackle malaria. And then you've got the other side of the coin where people are saying, well, they've got to be part of the solution. And I'd be interested to know, you know, it might be difficult for you to maybe express a personal opinion, but, you know, what are people saying? What are the conversations that you've heard in the halls, and how has that been a big topic of discussion? Because it certainly is outside of Sharm El-Sheikh. So it certainly has been a big part of the media and the media coverage.
Yeah, I think from my side, on, for example, Indigenous people's participation, I think it's too great to see many Indigenous peoples and Indigenous youth here present, and also they also have their pavilion, which I think is really cool, and I was really having a great time catching up with many friends there. And I think on other civil society stakeholder participation, like youth, obviously, because this year there's a huge focus on Africa, I've seen many grants and financial support provided to African young people. So I think there was a really high presence there, and also from MENA region generally. And in terms of fossil fuel companies or lobbyists, well, I personally didn't run into any, but I haven't got the chance to read any articles during COP, unfortunately. So in some way, I'm kind of isolated a bit from the news. But yeah, I definitely seen some big logos of not really any oil and gas companies, but I've definitely seen logos of many private sector companies in the blue zone, which I personally don't no idea you know what's the relationship or if the news were referring to those. But personally, I think generally, I don't think any processes were being influenced, or any negotiations are being influenced by those lobbyists. But again, like, some negotiators are usually seen as lobbyists themselves, and they represent their country's interest. And I think I've experienced a bit in technology as well, where a few countries who, let's say, highly rely on their single source economy may have been lobbying for fossil fuel interests within the negotiations, which I think yeah, it took people some time to reach agreement. But it's kind of yeah, it's not the first year, but still, like, sometimes I thought that, you know, we're arguing for really basic things that really just slows everything down. But again, I think going back to the question about, like, general participation, I do think that the civil society stakeholders have definitely, in terms of number, probably like a bigger delegation than previous years. But also, I think last week there was a meeting between constituencies and the new executive secretary, where many constituencies raised that having the bigger number of civil society stakeholders participating as observers doesn't really mean, or doesn't equal to stronger, more meaningful civil society engagement. And I think that's also a question that's quite interesting for yes, many people.
Yeah, okay, very good. And I mean, if I could proffer a view, I mean, I think that this, you know, people need to demonstrate, I think, if they're obviously in a activity or a role which potentially is against this agenda, they need to demonstrate that they're for the agenda. And if they can't do that, and there should be a little formula for that, and if they can't do that, then clearly it's going to create challenges for progress. So Shamim, I think you can now come in and hear us, I hope.
Hello. Hope
Good.
you can hear me. Yeah. So talking about I even don't know where to start, but I know I'll start somewhere. So talking about myself, I'm an environmental activist, as I introduced myself earlier, and a social scientist. But you know, I'm gonna be honest. I don't like being a hypocrite, especially when it comes to matters to do with climate change and climate crisis, because I come from this continent or from this country where I see these things happening. I see how people are starving, how animals are dying of droughts and everything. So I come from that kind of continent and that kind of country, the rising of water sea levels and everything. So I'm just going to be totally honest about everything. You know, when we talk about a representation, or when we talk about youth being here, do they know why they're here? Like, do they really know, do they understand the reasons as to why they are here? We are excited. Yes, we have the youth pavilion, which is there, and young people are being engaged in all those activities and everything. But do we really know and understand the reasons as to why we are here? Or we are just here as young people excited, like we went on that plane and fly to Cairo and to Sham, and Sham is beautiful, and we are here, like, you know, taking those cool and nice pictures and, you know, posting on social media, showing the world how we are at Sham and at Sham, or how we are doing great things at Sham. Do we really, as young people, especially, I know those who have been affected will understand exactly what I'm trying to say here. Do we really understand all the processes that are going on? As I had is it Lee saying earlier that she has not walked around and seen like all the logos from all those fossil fuel lobbies or something like that. Definitely they're gonna not put those, they are not going to put them in public and tell you we are being funded by so and so, by these kind of lobbies and everything. They're not going to put that in public for us to see. But it's us as young people, it's high time we stop being excited about everything that is going on, about getting those opportunities and chances. And it's high time for us to also be realistic and stop being hypocrites and say, because if it comes to fossil fuels contribution and everything, we all have flied here, right? We have all flied here, and it shows how we have all contributed towards the problem and everything. So the only thing to look forward is that make your flying meaningful. You've flown here, so make that meaningful as a young person or as an activist. Make that meaningful by giving out what is really needed. And looking at the representation of the indigenous people, to me, I don't see indigenous people. I don't see the local people here. For example, I'm talking of farmers. You do not just go and auction somebody somewhere and bring them here to speak on behalf of somebody who is down there, who does not even understand all these summits. They have never been here. They do not understand what is going on. And we use these languages that they themselves do not understand. And at the end of the day, they don't get anything out of it. People, how are we trying to make sure that we change the narrative to empower climate action, to empower change through our leaders? It's us speaking the reality, it's us speaking the truth of what is going on. Let us see that small farmer in your village up here. Let us see them here at the conference giving out their grievances, and not somebody doing it on their behalf. Because somebody who is doing it on their behalf, they do not understand what these farmers are going through, especially in these times of drought in Africa. They have no idea what is going on. So for me, when we talk about the whole representation thing and everything, for me it's more of like a business thing and marketing. How are we going to market? We are going to do this? We are going to auction people and take them to COP, and we say these are indigenous people. You have to dress this way. You have to speak up and say you're indigenous people and everything. Speak your own language. So for me, that is how it has. All these conferences have been turned into. We do it that way, but we do not look at that small farmer from that local community or from that indigenous community. We do not look at them and say, what are they feeling? What are their perceptions? How can we be able to bring them on the table? And then another thing is that for me, I'm more scared because we humans have put our desires and our needs first. We have forgotten to put the planet first. Like everything we are talking about right now, it's like even the whole conversation is about how is humanity going to survive? How are we going to do this? How is man going to do this? How are we going to help indigenous people? How are we going to help indigenous communities or youths and everything? But are we really making space for the planet? Because to me, the planet is a human component. We should treat it as a human. And if we treat it as a human, then we are also going to give it its wants. Sorry, I'm speaking that because it's to me it's really like I feel so emotional when speaking about all these things and seeing all the negotiations going around and people taking this like I don't know how to put it, but a job to me, which is more like really affecting me. So like, how are we also making sure that we shout out and say that we need the planet to have a seat on the table? Because when the planet have a seat on the table, everybody is going to be accountable, because you cannot see, as a doctor, you cannot see your patient dying and watch them dying. You're going to try everything you can to make sure you save them. That is the same way that these world leaders, the young people, the representation, and everybody who's here to COP and those who didn't make it, to ensure that the planet has a seat on the table. And if it has a seat on the table, we will all be accountable. We'll all be able to push for implementation. And you know, the good thing with the planet, and something that most people are forgetting, is that the planet has got nothing to lose. It has been there for years. It has been there for centuries without us, and it has been surviving. So what does this mean to all of us? It means that the planet will be able to adapt to the new conditions that will be there, but humanity will not be able to do that. So we should stop putting humanity first and forgetting that we should put the planet first, give it its warmth, and then we can talk about how can we solve the whole problem as one. And then another thing is that our world leaders do not have that unity, and they are not united in the problem. For instance, I had an interview this morning, and they were talking about we were having a protest on loss and damage, and here comes this reporter talking about the Swedish government not wanting to be part of the loss and damage, or not wanting to finance loss and damage, because they have been doing this. They have been supporting like Africa or the global south and everything, so they do not want to be involved in loss and damage. But to me, that shows how these people are not united. So it is for us to speak out one voice and stop being hypocrites, as people are out there and saying, you know, everything is good, we have this, we have that. Having them is not the solution. But what is the really process? Are we having these people inside the process? Are they involved in the process? Do they understand the process of all these negotiations? Do we understand all that is going on? Are we all part of the solution? Are we going to be part of the solution? We are not just supposed to be excited and say, oh, we as young people, we have the youth pavilion. Yes, we have it. Is the youth pavilion going to solve the problem? It's not. We need people to be in the process, to understand the process, and then we'll be able to bring out the joy out of it and the solution out of it, because we are part of the solution and not just part of the solution by ticking the boxes. We do not want that. We do not just tick boxes and say we have indigenous representation, we have ocean representation, we have the youth pavilion. We do not do that. We need to figure out how are we going to try and work together because it's like together for implementation. How are we going to work together to ensure that all this that is going to be negotiated, or all this that is being negotiated here at COP, is really implemented? And especially like looking at the climate finances and everything, how are we going to make sure that all these finances are channeled towards the right direction, towards the right people, towards that indigenous person who stays inside the Amazon, that does not even understand all these things. They have never been to these conferences. How are we going to make sure that all these funds are channeled to such kind of people to be able to adapt? Thank you.
Okay, so Shamim, thank you for impassioned words. And if I could just attempt just to say sort of what I took away. So I'm not paraphrasing because I wouldn't dare, but just to say very quickly what I took away. I mean, your first point about representation, representation needs to be broader, deeper, and the people who are representing need to be educated to a level at which they can contribute and know what's understanding. That was very clear. The language needs to be in common language. And we need to avoid that temptation to market everything. And I see a lot of that obviously because I'm not there. So I read all the LinkedIn and everything else, a lot of marketing. That was a very good point. I think putting nature at the center of things. Yeah, very well made. And partially I think that's language again. It's just reminding us that this huge sleeping partner is sitting there and they need to be brought forward. Your point about world leader unity. Absolutely critical. And the point about the unity, it's almost a false unity unless they've really taken on board and understood the depth and the meaning of the negotiations and what they stand for. So again, I think you make that same point there as well. So thank you very much indeed for those impassioned words. Selma, delighted to see you there. We can see you. I hope you can hear us. So,
yeah, hi everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation. And I was just hearing, and yeah, that's exactly what I want to state. And thank you so much for bringing it up. I guess like a lot was, I hope I didn't miss a lot. It was so interesting to hear.
I think that would be, yeah, subject to opinion. But so Selma, if you could just introduce yourself, we all introduce ourselves. A little bit of an introduction would be great, and then you know, as you wish, you might have very specific things you want to say, or you know, talk roughly about what you expected and what you see and how you see it going at the moment. So.
Yeah, of course. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation and for bringing us all here together to, I would say, update you what happened, what a lot has been going on. So basically, I'm Selma from Algeria. I'm a social and climate youth activist, also one of the younger members and contact points of the Human Rights Working Group. I have been among the, I would say, the lucky ones who were funded to go to COP and represent the voice of youth from not only my country, by my continent, and why not the world. I have been sponsored by Earth Uprising, which is an American. I want to really insist on that. It was actually an American organization who funded me, and for the accreditation that I got for COPE, it was by the Center of United Nations Constitutional Research, Concord. So I was, again, among the luckiest who got there and represented youth voice. To be honest, first, the reason why I'm really stating this, because it's so sad to see that every time I do make it into such conferences, it's always foreign NGOs, it's always NGOs from the US or Europe. It's never from my country or the MENA region. That's so sad to hear, because that's another reason why so many youth from these regions are not really making it to such gatherings, where they are not even able to represent their voice and address the challenges that they are facing, even though that we all know that these are we are living in the vulnerable regions and we're not having youth representation. So that's another question mark that we would love to highlight in here. Well, concerning the COPE, I had the opportunity to have some engagements and tasks there, and I had also the opportunity to take part in consultations where I witnessed two amazing news that I would love to share here with you as well. Well, the first one was the meeting that we had with the World Bank director and the director of South Asia as well at World Bank, where there was like so many challenges addressed in our discussion, and like they insisted on creating a new youth council for them so that they can address these challenges easily. And that's because of lack of communication and the gap that we're having when it comes to reaching out to our decision makers. Now, this is actually something that we have seen in all these regions, I would say these vulnerable regions. We were not able to contact our decision makers. A great example that I can give is me. I tried to reach out to my focal point and there was no answer. And I want to make sure that it was like I reached out to them like long time before it was like for a very long time before COPE, and I didn't get any answer, which was the same thing for so many activists and delegates there as well. So there was a question mark why we're not getting answers, even though we are well known at the national and international level as activists. So, but still we're not getting answers. So like not getting answers and not really not having our focal point showing interest in what we're doing as activists in the local and national level is something that we wanted to address. And we thought that the best council to do this would be the best solution to do this will be having a council for us where we can bring this up, where we can also talk about the other youth, why we are having only 1 or 2 representation in every COPE. I was the only Algerian in this COPE, the only young Algerian. That's just to be more precise. Which was the same thing for so many other African delegates as well. So thankfully, through this council, which is the South Asians also youth, they suggested for their region, and it was the only best solution to go for it. And also I was among the 25 selected Africans to have a gathering with the African Development Bank and some of the decision makers that were with us as well, where we had the opportunity to discuss more about why Africa is always left out, why we are not seeing the initiatives why there's no light shed on these initiatives that youth are founding and creating in Africa. Like we barely see African youth being presented. And I mean, except that I would love really to highlight that in the consultation, for example, they selected only 25 keeping in mind the gender equality. And there was like so many Kenyans there. And I'm so happy to see so many Kenyans, of course, for the first time having that huge presence. And it was very huge presence in COP. And that's actually something that I would love to bring as well. So the fact that we were discussing about the challenges in Africa, what youth are lacking, having us not involved at all in decision making, not even being introduced that we do have the right to make decisions and getting more involved, even though it's the continent where youth do exist so much, I would say. Bringing that suggestion was the only solution so that we can, I would say, kind of fix that gap and get it more involved, because I don't know, like the decision makers, for example, me, every time I meet someone, they'd be like, where are you? Why you didn't reach out? But we already did this, even though they are the ones who are supposed to reach out to us, not I mean, it doesn't make any sense, to be honest. And that's actually a problem that I have noticed in all the African countries. We are having that gap, and the word I would say activist and activism work in general is not that valued as we're seeing it in the other regions, and that's something that actually we addressed, and the only solution for it is also to create another council. And what I actually have noticed in the scope is that what was happening most of the time was comparing ourselves to the Europeans, and the Asians also comparing. And it's like, I mean, can you imagine, like, we got to this level where we were obliged to just compare why they are having this and we're not having this, why we are delaying that. I mean, we got to this level. Can you imagine? Like, this is, I mean, we're obliged to do this eventually. We ended up comparing, including the decision makers, actually. They ended up comparing in so many consultations that I have attended. It was like them comparing to other developed countries. They did this and we did this. So it's like, you guys need to be thankful for what we're doing, which is something that I don't know why we reached out to this level where everything is like, should be really addressed in a very weird way. Like, just to explain our practices and to explain that, oh, all is good and everyone is trying, and that's the only way how to calm you down and how to just prove that we're doing enough. So can you imagine? That's how I have noticed in so many consultations. That was the only way people were addressing things, through comparison. And we got to this level, including us as youth. We started doing this as activists, which is something that I have never wanted to go for, but like, it was the only way to, I would say, just pin things, I would say. So yeah.
So Selma, could I just ask for a clarification there? So when you say by the comparison point, so
yeah,
what do you mean exactly?
So basically, for example, for us as youth, like for example in Africa, we ended up like comparing ourselves to the global north, and youth, for example, in Europe. They did have their own council. They do have an open platform where they can actually get involved in decision making, turn their actions into implement their actions easily, which is something that we didn't have access to. So we ended up comparing all time to what the Europeans are doing, what the European youth are actually can have access to, which is something that I haven't noticed before. Like, we just used to talk about our challenges and how we can overcome them and suggest more solutions that fits our continent as a continent and as youth can tackle things. But this time it was more about comparison, more than just us insisting on certain practices that will fit us more and will, I would say, like, I would say, I don't know, like, we got into a level where we are not as we used to be before. Like, we used to do things professionally. We used to like insist on our challenges, like as activists who are trying to address them. We have been on the ground. We have seen how things are going on. It wasn't that good. I'm going to address them the way they are and just suggest solutions that fits my country and my continent, and not just like keep comparing them to the global north and other, I would say, countries, just because our colleagues are getting this and this and this. So that's how it is. And actually the same thing for decision makers as well. I attended a panel discussion where there was one of the decision makers. He was present there, and he ended up just comparing like to other country, how they would use, like how they are contributing to tackling climate change and how they are doing it, and look how better we are. But eventually they are both stuck. Like we're not seeing anything from both of them. Like that's the way that I'm seeing everyone is doing things. I mean, I don't know why we're getting to this level, but it's
Got
a
it.
question mark, I guess.
No, I understand. So am I right in thinking, so your point is that we need to spend more time thinking about our particular situation and how to respond to it, as opposed to compare in different contexts. And there might be some learning opportunity from that, but only if the context of the individual situation is well understood.
Exactly, 100%.
Okay, that's a very good point. And just to match that to the representation point, is you're not going to get that contextual understanding unless you have the representation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so but you started smiling and being quite pleased with the progress, and then you
yeah, I was like remembering.
You've digressed.
I'm remembering, I just left, so I came back and it's true, like I witnessed this two amazing news happening in front of me. They finally decided to create a council, but it's also sad, like the way they brought it this like I wish like it was just us deciding to build this council, focus on how we want to implement it using our own thoughts, not just like keep always comparing. It's gonna be exact the same how the others are leading it. It's gonna why so it should be always, it should fit our own problems, and it should always it's about tackling our own issues. That's it was an African consultation, so why you are trying to compare and why you are trying to add things that are not in Africa, and you're just trying to make it as good as we can make it good on our own way as well. So that's the thing, but it was amazing. I would say it was an amazing outcome out of that consultation, and I'm so looking forward to see it implemented. That's the best part. But I hope just it wasn't brought that way. It would have been just amazing.
Got it. And stepping back from that, any other reflections on sort of progress or the lack of progress for us?
Sorry?
Any other reflections more broadly on progress or the lack of progress against the big agenda items?
To be honest, I have seen some really great contributions made so far. I have seen, for example, just having the youth pavilion, we were able to address so many themes under side events that we have made there. We had the chance to invite panelists who were able to address where are they somehow planning to make this happen. But another thing also that I have noticed, and I'm not really sure if I should address it here, but I didn't like it. So I have noticed some side events that were there, and the panelists, it's true that they did have that amazing presence in our world, but the thing is that they brought so many side events. They brought panelists, I would say, who are decision makers, but they were not really familiar about what we want to hear. And we wanted to hear outcomes. We wanted to hear not promises, but plans that will be implemented. But they ended up addressing things that are not related to the theme, and for example, adaptation. And they were giving other stating other key points that are not really related. So I don't know who the blame should be. I don't know who to put the blame on exactly, because it's not only about inviting any panelists to deliver something or to just give any random promises, but it's about me trying to attend this panel discussion to hear about the plans, to hear about their reflections on our statements and recommendations, and which is something that I haven't heard so much. It's bringing someone who is not really having so much experience on what we want to hear, and it's just for the sake of, oh, we do have this amazing panelist, come and join us, and that's actually, I think, a mistake that I have seen, and it wasn't for once only, it was for multiple times, and it was actually a perspective that was shared by so many people as well. So this is something I have noticed, this scope. So I'm not sure if the others do agree on this or not, but yeah.
So Shamim's got a hand up there. So Shamim, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make a really like follow up on what she has said is that, what she's saying is really correct. Like you enter these panel discussions and you get in those negotiation rooms, and what people are actually doing, as I had said earlier, and you can quote me on that, is more that like marketing, whatever their agencies, marketing their organizations, and as well as looking for fundings and donors to be able to tap into whatever that they are doing, forgetting like what is the really problem that we have here on the table. For example, we are talking about Africa. What is the problem that we have in Africa that is facing Africa? It is water. How are we going to solve the problem of water? It's hunger. How are we going to solve the problem of hunger? It is renewable energies. We need to transit to that. How are we going to do that? So instead of people doing that, they're really doing quite the opposite, like trying to compare, like trying to bring out the perception of Europe to Africa, which we do not have such kind of equipment, or we do not have such kind of knowledge to do it. They're not really doing what exactly we want as a continent, or what we want as the global south, but rather they're doing like that is why I said it's more like doing what is best of my interest, what interests me the most, or what benefits my country is what is definitely happening here in those rooms. And you get out of there, you're so devastated, so disappointed with everything that is going on, and people discussing things out of topic, out of like, we are talking about adaptation, we are talking about loss and damage mitigation, decarbonization, water. How are we going to solve all those problems, rather than just trying to compare what we have in Europe and what we have in Africa? That is not solving the entire problem. So I just wanted to really air or echo on that one and make a quick catch up. Thank you.
That's good. I mean, Cathy, you got any views on that? Either counter views or supportive?
Yeah, I think probably a quick point from my side that I share some bits of it, although I think from my side, not really any strong feelings about it, but it just reminded me of an example that I had last night. So there was a dialogue between young people and Frans Timmermans, and someone asked a question about loss and damage finance facility, which is pretty much the topic of the week, or of the year, you can call it. And then he just said, oh yeah, I'm in theory open to the idea about it, but then he spent his whole intervention or response talking about the importance of mitigation and the importance of reducing emissions by G20, which I think is absolutely not relevant to the topic, but he's good at redirecting the topic. But I do think that EU member states in many ways are still trying to avoid responsibilities, and I think some of the conversations I've had in the past week have not been very constructive because of similar reasons.
Yeah, no, how interesting. And I suppose, it's easy for me to sit in my bedroom and imagine, how it would be made better. But I suppose one thing you're all saying is the context point comes through loudly and strongly, and we've already talked about that. I think that the other thing is, Shamim, you mentioned it, marketing. Selma, you've mentioned it. There is something about, leaving your organizational perspective behind. There's almost a set of principles that have to be applied here. Which is difficult, because on the one reason you're invited because of your organizational whatever role probably, but on the other hand, you've got to bring your best to it and to the issue, and not represent an organizational position. Otherwise it's just going to create confusion. And I think the third point, which is obviously for the politicians, it's the straight speaking. And I suspect one of the reasons that you do get strange answers sometimes is because people don't want to tell you what you want to hear. They're not ready to, or they don't know the answer, or they don't want to disclose something which is under negotiation. And so they should say that. And rather than, confuse everybody by talking about something else, they should say that. So, yeah, it sounds, fascinating and amazing, but also highly frustrating. And particularly for you guys who are trying to make a real difference and reach the right people in the right way and have the right conversations. So, yeah, I guess not that surprising, but a little bit dispiriting. So could we just flip in the last sort of 10 minutes of our conversation, could we just say, so given this experience, and you're all highly experienced anyway, this is not like your first outing at these types of events, but given the experience that you've had so far, the conversations you've had, are you, when you go back to whatever you do, is it going to change you in any way? What are you going to focus or prioritize on? And even if that's the same as what it's been, just tell us what it is. So inspire, you are all inspirational. We want to hear, what are your priorities when you go back? So who wants to talk to that first? Shamim, we can't see you. And I reckon you're going to have a view on that. Oh, someone's raising a hand. Okay, well, Sam, why don't we go you? And then
yeah, sure. I'm not having a hand on the keyboard. That was just like here.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, virtually.
That's all right.
To be honest, this is the first scope where I realized that there is a lot to do. We are still like, I would not say late, but like there's always a lot to do, no matter how many days we spend there, and no matter how many presidents and decision makers were there. There's always a lot on us to do, and that's kind of frustrating. But I think that's the thing that we need to convince the upcoming generations as well, which is amazing because we saw already children in the COP being so inspired with what we were doing, and they were like giving this vibes of showing interest in that, and I love the fact that they were there. That was really amazing. Like I really do hope. Like I don't want to talk about the next scope, to be honest, because like I feel like I'm tired from the first week already, and like I hope there will be more outcomes in the second week. I'm having hopes somehow, but what I'm sure about is that there's always a space for us, and that's where we all, I'm sure, here believe on, is that we will be always taking actions, we will be always following up with our advocacy, and the thing that we need to focus on more is convincing and I would say motivating other youth in our communities to take actions and to teach them how to do it and how it should be done. Because what I have noticed is that even as youth, we are making mistakes as well, and I have noticed it. We are still like kind of I don't know if it's like confusion that is going on there, or it's just us not getting what is happening. But like I have noticed that we are having, even us, it's not only decision makers. So we need to fix that too. We need to focus on our actions. We need to focus on how we should do things in a way that fits our countries and serves our challenges and serves the challenges of our, I would say, communities, and always make sure to be us who will make the solutions and not someone else, and not comparing and so on, whatever happened just last week. So it's more about us this time. So before we focus on accelerating actions, actually something that I just realized, before focusing on accelerating actions and implementing them, we need to focus on how we should do them and how we need to think of them as well as implemented actions. Because I think there is a lot to think of and there is a lot to consider before the implementation. I would not say we are not yet ready for that, but I would say like we still need to work on ourselves. That's something that I realized this scope. I don't know like why I'm saying this. It's so frustrating. I'm disappointed, I know, but like we still need to work on ourselves. We still need to rethink again and make sure that we are there for our countries, and we are there to represent the youth of the voice of youth from our communities and regions, especially the vulnerable ones, because we're barely having people there. So if us didn't do that, then who will do it, So like that's the thing that I want to say, but like the good thing is that we are still there and we still want to do things. So that's the spirit, and then we hope we can just make it better and we can do things, I guess.
Okay, so Selma, all the very best with that.
Yes,
much needed.
I need that. We need that,
and it's heartfelt. So big challenge, but heartfelt, and all power to you. So Shamim, Cathy, any comments? Can we hear from you?
For me, I would say it is high time that we as young people really presented what is actually affecting our communities or our countries, and that also present to the world leaders what we actually need. What do I mean by that? We need to also have priorities, because you cannot come to a country where we are facing hunger and you start telling me to plant trees. I'm not gonna do that. So we need to have, we as activists, we need to find a way where we are going to have priorities on the actions that we present on social media, because you never know who is watching, on the actions that we present on social media and on the way we present those actions, and also be able to involve other people and and other young people and share the experiences that we are having here. And something that I learned yesterday from we had a session with a dialogue with the European Vice President Timmermans, is that we as young people, and it is something that I've always been having with me, is that never despair and never lose hope, especially in this time of climate crisis. Let us still hold on to that, the small hope that we have. Let us hold in there and hang in there as we wait for what is to be decided next and what happens next. And just feel like, yeah, the environment needs us, the planet needs us, the planet needs our brains, and we can't change the planet only if we are united as young people. You know, another thing that I came to realize, the reason as to why we as young people are not involved in the process is that we go on the table. As a young person, I have a different voice, you have a different voice. So it makes people get confused, like what do we really address? And they end up just ticking the boxes. So we as young people, we should speak one voice of what is actually facing our continents or our countries, and let us address that with the agility that it deserves, with the energy that we have. And then I believe we got this. We got this, though we do not have time, but we got it, and let us not despair. Thank you.
Thank you. Cathy?
Yeah, I think really well said, Sharmin and Selma. I think from my side is obviously in terms of negotiations, I really want to see progress on loss and damage finance facility. Besides, you know, there could be other more innovative finance solutions out there, but you know, but still, I do believe in the importance of the finance facility, and also, of course, to see other negotiation track deliver the positive results. And I think beyond negotiations, I really want to. I think I personally had quite some really constructive conversations in the past week, and I do hope that that others will have, you know, will make really great progress, whether in events or in bilateral conversations this week. And I do see progress being made, although of course that, you know, thinking from a party perspective, that parties are not on track to deliver their NDC targets. But at the same time, non-state actors really are trying to advocate, and especially civil society stakeholders are trying their best. And I think, you know, parties and also other non-state actors really need to recognize the importance of everyone to collaborate together and to join forces to move forward. That I think is something that's needed. And also in general, I just also want to wish everyone to have some food. I know it's not so easy to find in the COP venue, and the price is also not very inclusive, but I do hope everyone get to eat some food and take some rest.
Yeah, and Cathy, just so when you leave COP though, and when you go back to life as usual, if indeed there is life as usual, you know, does this change what you think you focus on, or in any shape or form?
Well, I think multilateral processes is still what I focus on, and COP is obviously 3 hectic weeks for me, but it's part of the work I do and part of the processes I follow. So I would say for this COP, it brought me quite some frustration than I used to think about UNFCCC policy processes, mainly because of logistics and also you know, other reasons. But I still love the multilateral processes, and I think I still have, you know, that's still, you know, the same process that I understand. But in terms of life back to usual, I'd say definitely, since I'm using up every single day of my annual leave for this, I do want to try to explore more of a work-life balance next year. And this is definitely not the holiday resort that many people or myself expected. So hopefully, yeah, I'd say I'll probably see London instead of as going back to work, more as kind of taking a break and just enjoy the city when I get back.
Got it. Okay, so Salman, Shamim, I don't know if you've got anything else you want to say before we close. Shamim, just come off mute and start speaking if you want to, or Salma, you've come off mute.
Yeah, I would just say thank you so much for really bringing us here, because like, oh, I wanted to say this so much. Like, I just finally had a platform to just spit it out. So thank you so much. I appreciate it for doing this for us. And to be honest, I hope like we will still do great, because like it's all the work is on the ground. So we're gonna just follow up with that, and like no matter what, like the outcomes of the scope, we have gone through that already, so like we know how to deal somehow with that feeling. So, but like I just hope like it's more about us inspiring the others. So like I hope we will just do our best to just keep that happen, especially for the upcoming generations who are already showing interest in what we're doing. So otherwise, wish the best to everyone, and thank you so much one more time for the invitation.
Thank you, Selma. Okay, so just to close off, so thank you so much, Selma, Shamim, Cathy. We did see Nadia, but unfortunately she couldn't obviously connect properly. And thank you to Yasmin, who had to leave and get on a plane. So it is inspiring to hear from you. It is inspiring to understand both the appetite you've got for helping, everybody in this great challenge we face, but also, the care and the attention with which you think about your roles. So really inspirational. So thank you so much for that. Yeah, some really interesting things to think about, I think, for the people who organize COP. And so I would really hope that you can find a formal channel for voicing some of the things you've talked about now. I will write a short summary and then you can tell me where I've got it wrong or whatever. But, for you to then channel that through somehow, those thoughts through, so to improve next year's, the representation, et cetera, I think is crucially important. Fingers crossed for a good outcome on COP. Thank you everybody else for listening in as well. And very much enjoyed the Walk to COP27 initiative. And I've enjoyed it because I've met such a sensational group of interesting people. And I would include all of you in that. So thank you very much, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, and fingers crossed for a good COP outcome.
Thanks, everyone. And thanks, Sam, for all the efforts throughout the year.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.